KR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how are interest rates affecting real estate? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, interest rates are on the rise. How are they affecting mortgages? Today, mortgage consultant Mark Pfeiffer is here to discuss. Mark, welcome to Prudent Money.
Thanks for having me as always, Bob.
Okay, so here we go. We've talked about this. We talk about this every month. Now, things have shifted, I think that you would agree, a little bit since last month. Talk a little bit about what's currently happening in the market.
Well, it's shifted a lot. I mean,
maybe I was being kind.
2022 has been interesting just as a whole in terms of rates. Rates have been climbing since basically the start of the year, but just in the last few weeks, the last big inflation report that came out showed inflation was hotter even than expected at 8.6%. And everybody feels it, right? Between your gas tanks and go to the grocery store, it's just real expensive. And so when that came out really hot, rates just jumped. I mean, it was dramatic. It was about a half a point a day, give or take, which is not normal, clearly. So the Fed meeting last week, raising rates, 0.75%, that's what the market needed. So it's been wild. So what we have seen over the last, call it 30 days or so, is that the market, there's just not quite as many phone calls coming in for people looking to buy, or the ones that are out there are now giving some pause to what they want to do moving forward. So it's been a wild ride the last 30 days.
So what are rates as of today that anybody can go look at and see, by the way?
Yeah, so again, you know me. I'm always going to quote the Freddie Mac website. So FreddieMac.com, they post their websites. It's only once a week, so it's not real time. It's on Thursdays. But it's, as of last Thursday, it's showing 5.78 with about a point. It's 0.9. So to answer the question more generically, rates are sitting in the high fives if you want to pay a point, and they're in the low sixes if you don't.
I had no idea that it had gotten that high.
Yeah, like I said, it was. I mean, it was a substantial move in a very short period of time. They've been whipsawing around. So what's interesting is the market's acting very bipolar. So when the Fed came out, Wednesday and said, yes, we're increasing rates by 0.75, the rates just improved dramatically that day. It was awesome, right? It was a great move in our favor. Rates were going lower. Kumbaya. We're on our way to he's starting to fight inflation with a real threat of 0.75 increase. The next day, all those gains were just given back. So it's like the market doesn't know how to react, because that 0.75 increase, which, by the way, I think, hope, and believe it'll happen again in July, because what folks don't understand is when the Fed raises rates, so whenever you hear that, the headline come out saying, oh, the Fed raised rates, believe it or not, the mortgage industry wants that. We want higher rates from the Fed. We want them to get really aggressive, because inflation's like the number one enemy of mortgages and bonds. Anything that's got like that fixed rate of return, when inflation goes really high, it eats into those future returns. So when the Fed comes out and starts throwing the hammer down and they increase the rate really aggressively, it means they're serious about taking down inflation. So that's why, again, we want these increases to come. We want them to be swift. We want them to be aggressive and hopefully get inflation under check, because, again, the sooner inflation gets under check, once inflation starts going down consistently, I believe, and we'll see if I'm right, I believe home rates can and will follow. So I think they can and will follow, but that may be a 12 to 18 to 24-month crystal ball.
So talk a little bit about your industry as a whole. I mean, how are people that do what you do handling all of a sudden, and I don't know what kind of drop-off you're looking at, but a shift in the way business is run?
Yeah, so I mean, the good news is, and so to answer your question, how is my industry handling it? I'm going to ask. I'll give it to you from two perspectives. You got the veterans. So I've personally been doing this for coming up on 20 years. Like in about three or 4 months, I'll be doing this for 20 years in the industry. So we've seen a thing or two, right? Between the tech bubble bounce or the tech bubble and then the mortgage meltdown, and just littler, smaller adjustments here and there. The veterans, we got scarred pretty good, right? In 2008, during the 7 and 8, during the meltdown, the old pros, it's just, you just have that scar tissue from last time, and you're always just quicker to be scared, in my opinion, right? So it's one of those, you're like, oh gosh, and you just take a deep breath, and you realize while there are a lot of similarities, there's certainly a lot of differences between now and what was back then. The housing market fundamentally is still very strong. There's still an inventory shortage. That's not a good thing, but unlike last time, but during the major meltdown in 08, so 07 and 08, back then there was 3 million houses for sale and only 1 million buyers. Those numbers are backwards now. They're flipped. There's only 1 million homes for sale on 3 million buyers. So even as rates increase and values increase, and it takes out a lot of folks trying to buy, you still got a pretty normal and really good market. There's still the most recent stat, 60% of homes have multiple offers still. I mean, that's crazy. So the pros, I think, freak out a little bit more than if you're a newbie and you've been in the business for a handful of years, having not lived through that, I don't think you have the same scar tissue. So I don't know, maybe they freak out more because they've never been through it. Maybe they freak out less because ignorance is bliss. But the answer is we've all been, the people I know in the industry, across the country, got lots of friends everywhere. We've all been knowing that this is going to be, a tough year in the second part. If rates do go up, obviously demand may still be there, and there's still maybe that housing shortage. But if people push pause, right, a lot of folks are just saying, I'm going to wait to see. If there aren't any closings, it certainly can be a self-fulfilling prophecy where all of a sudden you see a little bit of a downturn in the housing temperature. So again, fundamentally, it's still strong. But you're right. To answer your question, I don't want to use the word freaking out because I think that's too extreme. But everybody's at least paying attention, and now everybody's having to roll up the sleeves and work a little harder for those deals as opposed to just the phone ringing off the hook like it was for the last year and a half.
So February 21st, I believe, wasn't the Ice-Mageddon February 21st? Or was it?
It was, yeah. It was February. I don't know the exact date, but it was
either February, 2021 right? Or 20. It wasn't 2020. It was 2021. That's right.
Yep.
And you remember the pictures that they would show on late night news where everything was just frozen and ice covered?
Totally.
That's what I think about when I think about the real estate market. Is that everybody's kind of frozen in place going, what do? I certainly don't think I want to pay a premium for this house. Boy, mortgage rates are certainly high, even though they're not really in the grand scheme of things.
Well, that's just it, right? So, again, I tell my team, I'm like, hey, have you guys ever heard the stories of people buying a house where the rate was 16, 18%? It's like, well, the moral of that story is people still bought houses, right? So as rates go up, look, rates in the 5s and 6s, you know as well as I do, Bob, that's a great rate historically. It's only by comparison from pandemic lows where rates were in the 2s or 3s or whatever that people think, oh my gosh, they're so high. They're not, right, relatively speaking. And then the other part, and I wish I knew who said this because somebody brought it to my attention from an Instagram post from 2 days ago. But there was a realtor out there, so whoever you are, if you're listening, I'll be happy to credit you if I knew who you were. But the tagline or the image was, marry the house and date the rate, right? So the point is when you buy today's house, the rates you're getting today may or may not be your forever rate. And so the way you could, quote, spin it, right, is if you bought today, if rates do nothing but go up and up and up, and I'm wrong, and let's say rates just keep going up, today's a great buying opportunity because you're getting the lowest rate you're going to see if rates keep going up and up and up. But if I'm right, and my crystal ball is correct, and rates do go down a year and a half to 2 years from now, if you bought today's housing prices, which, again, make no mistake, guys, the cooling off of the market doesn't mean house prices are necessarily going to go down. They just may not mean they're going up at 20% like they have been. Maybe they go up 5%, right? But that's still more expensive next year if it's up 5%. So if you buy the house today and rates do go down, you can always refinance in the future. So that's why I keep saying exactly like you said, frozen in time is, the ice storm. Things are bad, but there's always that, other perspective that says, today's not bad. And if there's a need for the home, because you got married, you had a kid, you're moving to Texas because you're getting away from California or wherever you're coming in, there's still going to be people buying and selling homes for stuff that's external. You just got the people that wanted to buy maybe sitting around looking, but the people that need to buy are still out there. So if somebody's looking to sell or wants to sell, I'd say still take that step and do the homework, because there are lots of people still coming into Texas, coming into Dallas, or have reasons that are external that want to buy a home.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're talking about rising interest rates. And the thing that, Mark, that makes me wonder, and we're closing on about a minute left, is that it seems like to get the kind of market that we've had, or even close to the kind of market that we've had, lower rates definitely play a big part of that. So if you take away that lower rate, then you really, like you say, have some stagnation for a pretty long time.
You could, right? If rates stay at these levels, it just makes, a large percentage of home buyers that were in the market have now been priced out. Because when rates were so low, it didn't matter, because the payment, because of the low rate, the payment was still affordable, even though the house prices have gone up. So now that house prices are still elevated and the rates have gone up, obviously it takes away some of those folks. The question is, do we find the equilibrium? Do we go from craziness to an equilibrium, or is there suddenly an oversupply? I don't think the oversupply is coming, but that's, time will tell. But you're right. You could see stagflation, certainly, and, who's to say how long that'll last?
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're up against a break. Stick around. Be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and K. Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by K. Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and K. Smith, pastorchuck.org.
Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Well, the stock market is in a confirmed bear market. What do you need to know? Well, first you need to know how bear markets really work. Second, an investment that has consistently made money in past bear markets. And third, what steps to take today. In a 30-minute webinar presentation, I will take the complicated study of bear markets and make it relatable so anyone can understand. I'll be presenting this webinar 3 times the week of June 20th. This will give us just the right amount of time to learn what you need to know. Plus, we'll be doing a live Q&A at the end. Stay off of the investment roller coaster, because you don't need to lose money in a bear market. To sign up, go to prudentmoney.com for more information.
You've been listening to A Place to Grow with Pastor Stephen R. Hill on this station at 1 p.m. for several years now. We're very thankful for our many loyal listeners. Be sure and join us at our new time, weekdays at 4 p.m. as Pastor Hill discusses your purpose, your destiny, and how God's Word and a biblical perspective can lead to a life of gratification and fulfillment. Be with us for A Place to Grow at our new time, weekdays at 4 p.m. here on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR.
Hi, this is Bob Brooks. What is the single most important verse on stewardship? Well, you can find that verse in 2 books, word for word, Matthew 6:24 and Luke 16:13. No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Wow, what a powerful statement. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we talk stewardship and how to stay in a committed, surrendered stewardship relationship with God. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show weekdays at 3 p.m. Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. Mark Pfeiffer, mortgage consultant, is my special guest. Mark comes on once a month and talks a little bit about rates and mortgages and real estate and gets us kind of up the curve on what's going on. We talked a lot, actually, the first part of the program about what's going on in the market. Let's talk a little bit about some specific situations such as home builders. I mean, how are home builders holding up?
You know, it's interesting. So we do work with a number of folks, both local and across the country. And I'm going to answer this like it depends. So if a couple of the home builders have, just by coincidence, a lot of inventory homes are hitting the market, meaning they built specs, meaning nobody had a contract on them. They built them hoping to sell them. Now that they're close to completion, these things are about to hit the market, and they have seen traffic slow down in the last 30 days, right? So, and by the way, and it's really hard, so we haven't had seasons for the last 2 years, right? COVID just changed things, and it's just been a weird 2 years. But historically, you got seasonality in the market, right? Like a lot of folks just don't go buy homes in November and December while it's the holidays. And then they, conversely, the summer months are usually jam-packed with people trying to get in before school starts. So you will find that, volume or business for new construction maybe gets a little slower during the summer months because obviously people are trying to get it into something that's ready-made and completed. So these builders that are having some specs that are going to be coming on the ground here in the next 2-3 months are starting to just, we're really talking about different options. We're talking about buying down rates, builder incentives to try to put out there to just say, hey, let us help with that payment to offset those things we just discussed in terms of affordability. Other builders, they just haven't had anything to sell because of just all the supply chain issues. There's some that just, they're still under contract from homes from a year and a half ago, where they're still trying just to complete those houses because houses have sat for some of these folks. I've talked to borrowers out there, buyers of new construction, where houses sat for literally 3 months with nothing happening because they're waiting on something, waiting on the HVAC or waiting on the windows. So in some relief, these builders, if they don't have anything to sell anyway, and they haven't been selling at this moment, they're not impacted simply because they don't have anything on the ground. But the other builders that have something coming on the ground, they're starting to kind of, look around and say, man, what do we got to do to make sure we can get these things sold? Because they've waited for so long to have them done that it is becoming, a real and apparent issue if this continues. So we don't know if this is just a, quick summer lull, and once these things are on the ground, will they get scooped up pretty quick? That's what the next 30 to 45 days will tell. So it's been very interesting. And then the last piece, we're all kind of wondering what happens with appraisals, right? So with these new construction, if they do, the question is, do they cut a price? So let's say you got 7 on the ground, 8 on the ground, you need to sell them quick because, they're making the payments on these things and they're ready to sell. They want them off their books. Do they cut the price, and how does that impact the value of the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and what I think I hear you saying is, this is where doing your research, really looking around, could pay off because you could find a home builder that is a little bit more motivated than usual to get rid of a house. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So in other words, again, if you're going into a community and you got one builder that's got 2 or 3 homes on the ground, just know that, they haven't had that in 2 years. Like, builders just have not had the inventory. Like we talked about earlier in the show, there's a lack of homes. There's a lack of inventory. So they've not had the put a home on the ground, put the sign out front in the yard when it's completed and said, buy me. That's not been a thing. So now it's just a different world. And like you said, if you're a buyer looking to buy new construction, absolutely. If you see one that's move-in ready or about move-in ready, just realize the builders may be willing to make that deal because it's not something they've been in, and nobody knows what this next 6 months will bring. I think bigger picture, like we talked about earlier, I don't think this is, time will tell. I don't think this is going to be the 07-08 crash. But it is a different feeling because of where we are. But yes, if you're buying a home and there's builders with inventory sitting, absolutely, this may be a great time to get in with a few extra perks that you may not have gotten 2 months ago.
Well, I don't know. I totally agree with you about the 07 and 08, and I was, in fact, glad you brought that up because I was going to mention it, is that this is not an 07, 08 because this is not a toxic mortgage problem. this is a consumer sentiment problem, is what it is. If you really look at it, because it's going to come down. How motivated are people going to be to sell their house? And tell me what you think about this. It seems like a lot of the transactions that occurred during the boom, they didn't necessarily need to occur.
In terms of didn't need to occur, right? In terms of, are you saying like the purchase prices were, people sold because they just could get a good value? Is that what you mean by they didn't need to occur?
I'm saying that someone put up their house because they felt like they could get $200,000 more for their house, and so if they don't, it's not necessarily that they hate their house. They're just looking at the transaction, and so so I think that you could wonder. I just wonder what a stagnant. I go back to that Snowmageddon, Ice-mageddon example. I just wonder what a stagnant real estate market looks like, and the effects of that going forward, if that is truly the case. Because, like he said, 12 to 18 months is a long. If that is the case, it's a very, very long time. And I think it really comes down to not so much is inflation going to trend down, it's going to peak, which is Wall Street so stuck on that right now. I think it's these high levels, which are really probably 20 to 25% inflation. How long is that going to stick around? Just the stagnation.
And that's the $1 million question, right? And that's why I go back to I hope the Fed comes to their senses and keeps their foot on the pedal and just really just hammers the rates and just increases them to control inflation. So exactly like you said, and I love it. This is a consumer sentiment, issue, not a bad loans. The 07-08 was created by bad lending practices. So this is, I don't mind if the Fed's going to, death by paper cuts would be the worst. I'd rather, and recession's coming, in my opinion, recession is coming. It'll be a Fed-induced recession for the purposes of controlling inflation. So I just hope they make it swift. Let's get there sooner than later so we can deal with it and process it, because I'll take a short, quick recession all day long. What I don't want is the long, drawn-out, just beat down if they don't get aggressive enough on this. So I think there's demand. There's always going to be somebody willing to buy a home. People bought when rates were 18% back in the day. Now, does it mean as many people can be homeowners at 18%? Of course not. You're going to have some people priced out of the market. But at the end of the day, if the stats are correct, right, and I've not individually gone through and counted, 3 million people wanting to buy homes, but the stats repeatedly will show there's 3 million folks out there, even if that gets cut by 2/3. If 2/3 of the market disappear because of the rates or the stagflation, it puts you at an imbalanced market with 1 million home buyers and 1 million homes for sale. And there's always going to be somebody having those kids. There's always going to be somebody getting a job, reload, transfer, or something of that nature, because the comparison is you rent. Rents have gone up 20 to 30% year over year. So it's not like, buying a home, you at least get the equity. And again, the rate's not a forever rate in most cases. So again, I agree with you on the stagflation, but I just don't know that stagflation. Now, again, a slowdown, sure. But I hope we don't get to that stagflation. And just the data would suggest there's still a healthy, fundamentally, there's still a healthy demand out there, but it just may be a 6-month, pause. The consumer sentiment may be saying, I might wait and see what this year brings before they truly come back into getting real aggressive to buy.
Yeah, I guess the biggest problem is that it's kind of an optical illusion. The federal funds rate would have to come way up. I mean, way up to do any damage. I mean, they're going to have to take. Well, that's long. Get into this, but they're going to have to do other things to take down inflation. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think anybody can say for a fact this is going to happen. I forecast this to happen. This may be a time in one of the few times in history of calling markets that nobody can really call this one.
Yeah, and again, I'll give my crystal ball, because that's, everybody's got an opinion. I'm not scared to say mine, and I very well tell everybody I could be completely wrong. I mean, I might get some of it right, but that's not because I'm good. It's just because I got lucky. But yeah, I mean, this is, every time you're in one of these positions in history, right? And I've done this for 20 years, there's been 2 or 3 points where something major has happened. Both are just unique, right? What happened in 07 and 08 was unique. What's happening now is unique, right? So to your point, we can't predict it. It'll be very interesting because I can see both sides of this coin. I can argue why inflation could and should be under check by, the beginning of Q1 to say, okay, we get this thing figured out because the demand will get squashed if the Fed keeps just crushing rates, and I hope they do. I'm good with a temporary, quick, get it done, kick me in the gut today and just get it over with. I can also argue why your point of stagflation, or just inflation continues, and it's just going to be a complete and utter just beatdown for a long time for the Fed to play catch up. So it will be very interesting. Obviously neither one of us has a crystal ball, but I can tell you right now, the real question is how long will this last? Is this a temporary, 1 or 2 month thing, or is this a 1 or 2 year thing?
This is Bob Brooks. If you want more information about Mark, go to mortgagemark.com and check it out. Mark, so good to talk to you. Talk to you next month.
Yes, sir. Have a good day. Thank you.
Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Make sure that you go to the website because on Thursday and Friday, we're doing the repeat of the webinar. So we're in a bear market now. Had a great turnout, and you can go sign up for it. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.